The focus on judgment is a big thing. Guilt and judgment.
I'd say guilt, judgment, the spiritual bypassing. Although what I do understand is that people were encouraged to work on their psychology as well. And yet there was definitely this attitude around negative emotions as being caused by discarnates, is like not having your energetic field shored up enough. So there was this sort of notion of spiritual failure attached to emotional disturbances as well.
Right, like you're weak, and that's why that's happening to you. You're spiritually not strong in your defenses. Also, I saw it as a way for some people to be like, man, I just feel this heavy opposition today. And it's kind of a way to not take responsibility for your own well-being and physical and emotional state. So you're saying that, oh, I'm feeling this way because, or I'm not clear-headed today because this energy is being directed against me.
Not calling anxiety or OCD or
right.
not actually calling it a spade. And then also people kind of with what you were saying, Justice, with the spiritual failure bit, I think people were encouraged to pray away their problems, but it depends on the person. Some people would be more action oriented, seek counseling, seek whatever resources they needed. And some people wouldn't. Some people would go sit in their bedroom and just do like an hour of Violet Flame and call it good, and then feel a little bit better, but their problems are going to resurface because whatever the core problem was with that particular person wasn't necessarily addressed just by praying, by praying on it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Justice Bartlett, healer, hypnotherapist, and writer. And I grew up in Church Universal and Triumphant, living on the ranch till I was about 16. Then I moved out into the world and began the process of rebelling, recovering, and finding myself. You can learn more about me at illuminationwithjustice.com and the services that I offer, the things and topics I write about.
My name is Baird Lewis, and I'm the co-host of Blinded by the Light. I grew up in Church Universal and Triumphant and was around that environment daily until I was about 18 and didn't really fully let go of the beliefs until my late 20s. Today on our show, our guest is Leif Christian. He's a 36-year-old musician. He wasn't born in Montana, but he's lived most of his life in Montana. He's had experiences within his family that relate to both Church Universal and Triumphant and the offshoot organization, the Heart Center. Leif, if you want to tell a bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Leif Christian. I'm glad to be here today. I am a musician. I own a painting business. I play, pre-COVID, more so played solo and trio gigs around Montana. My power trio and acoustic as well. I do some freelance audio work for things such as the Montana sessions, Advanced Pants Back Pasture sessions. I studied classical piano and guitar at the University of Montana, and I have a lot of event coordinating experience, hosted a lot of events and a couple of festivals here in Missoula through my nonprofit, Montana Musicians and Artists Coalition. And other than that, I'm a very new web developer.
Yeah, you're a multi-talented guy. A lot of people came out of that environment, like Montessori education, just very smart, bright, Swiss Army knife people. So
that's a good way.
Cool. Yeah, it's cool to see what you're doing now. Can you tell a little bit about your backstory and how you and your family ended up in Montana?
Yeah, that's a good way to start it off, I guess. So I was born in North Hollywood in 84. My parents met through the church. So a church member actually introduced them to each other. And so for me to really conceptualize of what my life would be like without the church doesn't really make sense, because my parents met through the church and I was born into this church cult movement, whatever, if you will. We were one of the later families to move to Montana, I think, because we had kind of an established life in California. My dad was a attorney. Father's rights was kind of his main focus in law. And we had a beautiful house, and we moved up when I was 13. So that would have been 97, 98, something around there. We moved up to Livingston. So it was kind of funny because you think about going from the city to the country, but it was kind of the opposite because we had a beautiful house with acreage and like 30 fruit trees. We had a hot tub, a pool, like the back porch was lined with rose bushes, and it was just this beautiful area of La Habra Heights, California. And we moved from there to Livingston to a house on the block. So yeah, from the country and the city to the city and the country, I guess. And of course, I guess we're here to talk about why that might have happened, why we spontaneously moved to Montana from sunny Southern California. And if you want to know why that is, just ask Justice.
Why you moved from sunny Southern California?
Any ideas?
Well, I'll take Colts relocations for 500, Bob.
Sounds good. All right. So, let's start off with that. I feel like the best way to do it would be kind of to explain what happened. I know a lot of people who are listening to this already know what happened because they grew up and they're well versed in the whole situation. But for people who may not be, the Church Universal and Triumphant organization was founded, I think, in Colorado Springs, moved shortly after that to Malibu. I know they had a beautiful church property in Pasadena. I don't know if that was rented or owned. But at some point, they acquired this large swath of land. I think it was 14,000 acres, I read recently. That's the actual number. Bordering Yellowstone Park. So they acquired this property from Steve Forbes, I believe. And it just beautiful, pristine property bordering Yellowstone Park. And they decided to tell their followers that it was the will of God. The messenger received a message that it was time to move the central operations of the church to Montana. So as a result of this, and I can't tell you how many friends I have that went through the same thing. They had roots, maybe they're born in California, and their families relocated up here to Paradise Valley, Livingston, Gardner, immigrant Montana, outside of Bozeman. Yeah, some people moved earlier than others. Some people moved like right away when they bought the property, so they were kind of in on the ground floor. I would imagine Justice, your family moved to the ranch earlier than ours did. But is that not right?
We joined staff in 1989.
89. So yeah, way before. There was kind of this huge movement of people and families kind of not uprooting, so to speak, but it's definitely a change to go from living in California to living in Montana in kind of a rural setting from it's kind of interesting to think about, because when I think about what Malibu is now and Malibu people coming up to kind of a frontier like undeveloped Montana pre all the tourist stuff, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So we came up here, and the main reason that our parents gave us for why we were coming up here was they kind of gave us a choice. They said, hey, this is really great school. Do you guys want to be a part of it? We already knew a lot of these kids. We went to the church summer conferences when we were in California, so we had a history of coming up here and connecting with the same group of people. So it was kind of funny to think about. But the education was really, really quite good. But we were talking about, hey, do you guys want to go to this amazing school in a double wide trailer in immigrant Montana with like 25 other students? we were into it. I don't know why they asked us. I was 10 at the time. My brother was 12. And it's funny to look at that in context. You're talking about people who have given you this set of philosophies and ideas about life and what it is. And they're asking you questions then, which are almost like expected to be mirrorings back of what they told you, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if I was older, if I would have been like, hey, do you guys want to leave this house and go live in Livingston? Be like, I don't know, man. maybe I prefer to.
Well, it's
hang out where
hard
it's
to
warm
give
and
a
surf all day.
Yeah, hard to give a
Whatever.
person a question where they really don't have any reference for what you're talking about.
Right, but like I said, we came up to Montana a lot. Some of my earlier memories of Montana are staying up. How do I describe the land? So there's these little creek valleys and meadows in the summertime. Everything's very lush and beautiful, just endless beautiful nature, deer, elk, mountain goats, all kinds of wildlife, everything you can think of, eagles. And it was just a really beautiful, picturesque setting. So we went there, and our parents would go to the church sessions. They would go sit in rooms and listen to dictations. So messages coming directly from God through the messenger, Elizabeth Prophet. So she's sitting in a room, and they're saying, okay, now today Gautama Buddha is dictating through me, and today it's Mother Mary. And then everybody's around them thinking that they're now live witnessing God talking. Meanwhile, all of us are over in the teen program, like sneaking in booze and like trying to make out with each other without anyone knowing, and illegally trading candy and stuff.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But we had so much fun doing that as kids. We were in the Scouts. We hiked all around all these mountains. We went on like backpack survival trips. We did a lot of cool shit, and really, I think we had the better end. A lot of us of that situation. Our parents were sitting there like doing these rhythmic chanting prayers and kind of being given all this judgment of, if you don't live this strict kind of monastic lifestyle, giving up pleasures and stuff and focusing on spirituality, that there's going to be something bad that's going to happen to you. And I don't remember, like me and my friends, we were rebels. We weren't really, it didn't seem to affect us.
Yeah. What was it like for you and your friends growing up on the church property?
So I grew up in Immigrant in Glastonbury and in Livingston. So I know from what I've heard from a lot of people that we were lucky, kind of. We were a little removed from the heart of everything crazy that was going on, in a way. Growing up in Glastonbury was awesome. For me, I mean, so I remember being 12, 13 and being like stuck up at my mom's house, and you would like, Mom, can you get a ride down to the store? Because all my friends are down there, and it's summertime, right? We're jumping off the bridge into the Yellowstone and floating down, and I remember I was one of my first friends of us to get a car, and so everyone would like pile in my car, and we would all go places and stuff. But I remember that kind of being isolated and stuck up there in Immigrant, and then I got a dirt bike when I was like 14, before I had a license. And my buddy David's dad was this Swedish guy, and he would like just rally these cars like crazy, like fishtailing around these dirt corners. And like he kind of got us all started on this, I don't know, this like hot rod car club. Not anything like official or anything, but we were just like having fun doing teenager shit. I guess the main thing as far as growing up on the church property and around people like that is, for me, at a young age, I was always rebellious against it. From the time I was 12 or 13, maybe a lot of that rebellion came from my parents breaking up when I was 1. There was bitter custody fights kind of through my whole childhood. I had a stepmom, and my mother, Elizabeth Prophet, was actually a mediator between my parents at one point. But so I don't know if I just kind of came into that rebellion as part of being a teenager, like everyone, a lot of people do. But I hear some of these stories, like the group that we've been all talking in, that actually my sister started because of some stories that she heard about people's experiences and trauma through the church. So she created this Facebook group of all of us church kids, and we started connecting, and then it turned into this big thing. Everybody invited everybody else. But through that group, some of the stories of people I heard are a lot different than mine. They were some people that were closer to the organization, people whose parents were more extreme and fanatical and used the philosophies to justify abuses and all sorts of crazy behavior that they were subject to. Also kids that were a little older than me, because at 16 it seemed like the core membership of the church started to dwindle, because this was post the shelter cycle where they said the world's going to end, we all have to go into these bomb shelters that we made, spent millions of dollars on, and then we saved humanity with our decrees, I guess, right, with our prayers. So after that, obviously a lot of people left the church. And so by the time I was fully coming into being a teenager, most of this hardline fanaticism was on the way out. And so I know that kids that were a little older than me didn't have the same experience. Like I said, closer to the organization, living in Corwin Springs, maybe a little older. So they were 16 years old and their parents weren't letting them listen to any popular music, hang out with friends that weren't part of the church, on and on, strictly limiting their diet, feeding them this macrobiotic shit. And at that time, nobody knew how to cook. It's just like removing all the flavor ingredients and giving kids poverty food, telling them that that's it. You have to eat it. So I can see how some people would be a lot more bitter and hold a lot more resentment towards the organization than I do.
Well, I can tell you as a kid who did grow up on staff, who was like in the heart of it, that I feel like that we were held to a higher standard.
Right.
As being closer to being, representatives, like light bearers and, keepers of the flame and all of that, that most of the parents took that pretty seriously and held a more sort of stringent code that the kids were expected to follow. And part of it, I think, is that, but the other part of it is also accessibility. You got to remember, like, we're living in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. Like, seriously, there was nothing nearby besides what they chose to provide us with. So it's like, we would hitchhike into Gardner, which was like 6 miles from Corwin Springs.
Oh, yeah.
And like, when we were younger, it was like to get candy. When it was older, it was to try to figure out how to get cigarettes. Right. But I mean, part of it is the strictness, but the other part of it, I think, is to take into consideration is just the accessibility. If they weren't providing it, we didn't have access.
Right. And I think I've been thinking about that too. And I think it's really interesting to look at that. And really what you're seeing, I think what a lot of people are seeing as far as the fanatic aspects of the people that were on staff, right? The people that they basically signed themselves up to be monks.
Right.
And without their permission, they signed up their kids, if that makes sense. That's kind of, so these people are, you know what I mean? So they're saying,
I do not consent to this.
Right. Yeah. So they're saying that I'm on staff, so I'm working for this church, and I've decided that I'm going to eat only health food, not eat red meat, have a macrobiotic diet, no pork, no sugar, no toxins or anything that would be construed as drugs or anything like that. And I'm going to live this, suppose that I've told myself this life of purity, but also you have to do it too, as a teenager. And you're just exploding inside, and like your friend showed you whatever, this Nirvana on MTV, and you're like, holy shit, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, or whatever. And that's just totally blocked off from you completely. And so I could understand why a lot of people have a different experience than I did. With any sort of religion, especially ones that have more of an extreme aspect as far as the ideology or the practice of the ideology. It's really easy for that to attract crazy people, or not just crazy people, people that can find a way to use it to justify their shortcomings, their idiosyncrasies. And this is something that's happened throughout history with religion. And it is like I was watching the great job, by the way, on the podcast with Sean Prophet and Christoph. But yeah, so that in religion, you have this direct way of justifying all these things that are otherwise unjustifiable. And that's one of the issues with it. But I think that in the church, the membership was a combination of people that were honestly seeking some sort of truth and trying to connect spirituality in a way with their lives that was meaningful. And also a lot of people that were there because they were a little out there and they were like, oh, this fits.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, my dad, well, now he's a cult leader, but
yes, 2.0.
yeah, cut 2.0, carbon copy cut. I remember him telling me when I was a kid that he knew he was going to be a priest when he was like 12 or something. So he had kind of already like,
wow,
mentally prepared himself for some kind of a life trajectory, like being a spiritual leader, even as a very young kid, and then found the church at only 18, and then met my mom and married my mom in a very short period of time. We're going to address this in another episode. What can happen with that is the church doesn't, I heard from somebody else, and it makes perfect sense, that the church doesn't really set up marriages for success. And I think you could speak to this a little bit, because if you're on this path and your ultimate goal is ascension, you have a lot of opportunities to neglect your spouse in different ways.
Huh.
And so people can be kind of selfish in like whatever they're doing, or even like, it doesn't matter if it's decrees or spending more time with the congregation and less time at home. There's probably different elements that happen in different families, but if your focus is not on your family and your spouse, and your focus is on, I'm going to balance 100% of my karma, or whatever percentage you need. There's certain levels of percentages that Elizabeth Prophet said. I think it's like 51 or 52%.
51. Yeah. You just got to get over. Yeah.
Yeah,
over that half mark.
51%, and you qualify for your ascension. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make it, but the higher your
you still got to get it notarized and like.
Yeah, the higher your progress bar is, the more likely you're going to ascend in this life. And so I think some families probably dealt with one parent who kind of either neglected the family or neglected the other parent, because their focus was this spiritual progression and not the immediate needs of their family or their spouse.
Right. That definitely happened. I've seen families that suffered because they were kind of split between their fervent belief and kind of relative indifference. I knew a lot of kind of like church families with cool dads who were like, yeah, that's a little out there for me, but yeah, I'll go on, on Sunday, or I'll go to the conference and make an appearance. And so I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of kind of like there was a lot of fringe membership, I would say. And some families were just fantastic people. And, if you want to go down certain roads talking with them about things, you're going to be like, wow, these people are fucking crazy. But if you don't go down these certain avenues,
stay over here.
Aliens, things happening to you in your life is your karma from past lives, whatever it is. But in general, a lot of these were good people. And I saw a lot of, maybe like the mother who was devout, and she was really focused more on her church community than on her family as a unit. And then maybe just that sort of division between and it makes no sense, because if you're supposed to be focusing on your spirituality and bringing yourself and your family closer to God, then that is a hypocrisy that's right in front of your face that you're basically reinforcing every day, which kind of is contradictory to their actual philosophy. So, and that's one of the interesting points for me, like from that podcast that I just watched with Sean, is that you can use this however you want. So you can make anything okay by having a certain set of beliefs that allow for any holes that you have in your psyche, your personality, anything that's just seriously lacking, you can justify it. So that's a problem.
Well, and here's another thought too, that like inner work by its nature can become a bit narcissistic because you are focused intently on yourself. And this is something I bring up to my clients, and I'm not saying narcissistic as using it as a villainous term. I'm saying that the focus, like narcissism in its developmental stage, it really kind of encompasses like the first few years of our life where we are meant to be very egocentric. And the type of inner work that's being done where it's all about you and balancing your karma and becoming a better person, if it's not balanced out with interacting with your family, with your spouse, relationally, engaging with the community under meaningful auspices, then it does have a tendency to become a bit self-involved and narcissistic. Underneath, you get a bunch of people sort of all focused in that same sort of way. And I think inevitably there's going to be a neglect of family members, of spouses, of relationships. And even as we've been talking about in some of our other podcasts, even of their own physical existence, because the focus becomes so fucking narrow.
I'm putting all of this money on my next life, basically.
Right.
This doesn't, and you watch people's lives and they're currently in shambles, right? And if you've been anchoring all this light and you've been working so hard here, shouldn't you see some sort of fruits of your labor in this existence?
Yes.
It doesn't have to all come on the other side. So there's definitely a disconnect of that from that. Also, I've seen, like you were saying, a lot of sometimes neglect of a child's needs, or even like a kid trying to discover who they are and not really having a clue because of whatever narrative they've been given or adopted. And a lot of times the parents, they don't have a clue that they're even doing this.
Right.
But I think you have to think about this in context, because when all this was happening with the Church Universal and Triumphant here, this was the 90s. And if you look at other swaths of the American populace, you're going to see a lot of the same things.
It's
You're
true.
going to see a lot more of this corporal punishment, a lot more homophobia. I mean, even as like standard, all these sorts of things that we all in unison are saying are not acceptable now.
Well, and another thing is like
more acceptable societally. If you look at any of the music or culture from that time, you'll see that. And it's not acceptable. It doesn't make it okay in any way, shape, or form. But this was a reality of growing up in that time period. People were closed-minded, especially religious people. People were dogmatic and drew these hard lines. And religion kind of got the worst parts of that.
I think you have to include the kind of the latchkey phenomena of that generation as well. A lot of us were left to our own devices for a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
We largely raised ourselves.
No, seriously. Like, I remember when we were kids, even in California, me and my brother would just go on bike rides. We'd go all the way into downtown, not into downtown, but down into Whittier. They didn't know we didn't have a cell phone.
Right.
And you think about that now and it seems crazy, but also it was a much safer time back then. There wasn't as many, statistically, there wasn't as many predators and things like that. But yeah, we were out there scraping our knees and doing whatever, and who knows. And most of us survived, I guess.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the positives, I guess it can be a positive and a negative depending on the family. Like one of the positives was self-reliance. Like we were based on like the Montessori education and based on kids being left to their own devices, like just becoming self-reliant to find your own way, make your own way, learn how to do things, often by trial and error. You know, for some kids that was getting in trouble. For some kids, that was like taking a computer apart and putting it back together. For some kids, maybe it was, it was music. Like you've been doing music since you were really, really young. And then for other kids, like if they embrace the philosophy as strongly as some of their parents did, they might have been decreeing like an hour a day, like doing ritualistic chanting,
Oh yeah.
So yeah, there's a whole spectrum of that.
Speaking of decreeing, Leif gave us, when we tried to do this before, you gave us an incredible example. Yeah.
We got to do it.
You got to do it.
Oh yeah.
You got to do it.
So for anyone, I don't know how many people so far are listening to this that aren't kind of acutely aware of the whole situation, but for anyone who isn't, so Church Universal and Triumphant is a church / cult, whatever you want to call it, formed on the basis of there being a living, breathing messenger that's speaking through her the word of God from ascended beings, masters, angels, saints, archangels, which are like super angels, elementals, whatever. Actually, I don't know, that wasn't a thing, but on and on. So basically they have all these prayers, and it's remarkable the amount of work that she put out. She wrote like 50 books between the two of them, and that's not even including the lectures, the transcripts of the lectures, the pearls of wisdom, on and on and on, and all of these decrees, which are rhythmic, rhyming poems about God. If you never heard one before, and then you walk in on somebody doing one, you're gonna be like, "What the fuck is going on here?" Because it's kind of creepy sounding. So here's an example. They have a concept called the violet flame. So the idea is there's different rays and different colors of energies, and violet flame is an energy that's connected with love and healing, and it's like an intense purifying energy, something like that. Violet flame. So try to use the violet flame to burn out your physical, the density in your body, and shake off that darkness or whatever it is. Keep away evil spirits, on and on and on. Raise your vibration, more violet. So they have this prayer, and it goes, "I am the violet flame in action in me now. I am the violet flame, to light alone I bow. I am the violet flame in mighty cosmic power. I am the light of God shining every hour. I am the violet flame blazing like a sun. I am God's sacred power freeing everyone." Right? So you look at that, that's nice, right? It's cute, it rhymes. They're not talking about sacrificing children or drinking Kool-Aid. You know what I mean?
Relatively benign.
Right. So they're talking about these pretty little concepts about what they believe is this kind of like imagined fantasy world that they created around God. So that's what the poem is. So, but then the idea is you can use the science of the spoken word to quicken the action. So you say these things faster and with more intensity, and then it brings down more light into your being. And I actually recently, I went back and I listened to a lecture by Mark Prophet, Elizabeth's husband, the original founder of the church, where he talks about this. And he's sitting in a room with people and he's telling them how to decree. I was wondering, like, why is he doing this? Why? He's making it a thing where, like, you have to do it a lot. You have to do it a lot. This was a bit like all of us know our parents spent hours and hours of their lives, days of their lives, total like days of their lives doing this. So anyways, here's an example of one at full speed. So you have that, I am the violet flame. So it goes like this. I am the violet flame in action in me now. I am the violet flame to light alone I bow. I am the violet flame in mighty cosmic power. I am the light of God shining every hour. I am the violet flame, blazing like a sun. I am God's sacred power, freeing everyone.
Fucking
Right?
love the inflection, man.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the last
Thank
word,
you.
the
Boom.
last word or two words, they'd always like ram at like 4 times the volume to like really ram it through.
So
there was
imagine
another
walking
one
in
that,
on a room full of people doing that in unison, and you never saw that before. You'd be like, "What the fuck?"
And hours. This would go on for hours, right?
Sorry, Baird. What were you saying?
I was going to say there's another one called Estrellas. That's one of their most popular ones. And they would speed it up. Like, I can't remember. I think you do 33 of them. Like you do a,
These people are rap artists.
Oh, I remember this one.
Amateur
Oh,
rap
beloved,
artists.
astray, make God purity.
yeah.
Manifest now for all to see.
And by the time you say it, like the 20th time, they're saying it so fast that it's like, oh, no, 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 no.
And you know what's funny?
That's what it sounds like.
I literally went back to the trance. I listened at my job when I'm working. I often I can listen to music or listen to whatever and use my hands. And so I have a lot of time to do that kind of stuff. So I listened to a full tape of a lecture that Mark Prophet gave, where he actually said that that's not the point. You lose the beauty of the melody or whatever. It doesn't have the potency, which I don't know. Something got lost in translation that didn't fit the new narrative, whatever. But yeah, so there's rooms of these people, and they would sit around doing this kind of stuff for hours, and it goes on and on. I mean, there's so many of these decrees, and I have, like a lot of you, them burned in my head. I could probably recite 30 of them right now with decent accuracy because I just heard my parents doing them growing up. And we were supposed to say them before school at the church school. That was there was like 30 minutes or 20 minutes of decrees every morning, but we weren't forced to do them. A lot of us stood there silently. And it was nothing like some other people's experience where they were like punished for not doing it.
No, that's true.
But that's just my experience.
Crazy. I want to throw out there that Vice, like at one time, this was a well-known enough cult, fringe religion, whatever you want to call it, that like Vice and Insider Magazine have both had articles about the church. And if you Google Church Universal and Triumphant cult decrees,
Yes.
the first thing that comes up is a Vice article about somebody who found an old cassette tape where they would decree against rock and roll. And so they'd have this thing called an invocation that would prepare the people to then do, 10 minutes of decrees or 20 minutes or an hour, however long. Yeah. And so if people have a chance to, I will try to link to it in the description, but it's a really fascinating article that kind of explains it more and how there's kind of in the recesses of the internet, there's like when people used to like trade VHS tapes and bootleg VHS tapes, there were people that were trading bootlegs of decrees. This rock and roll expose that had a bunch of decrees on it. Yeah. And the author of this article just describes it in a really interesting way that can kind of explain it for people that have no idea what it would be, what it would sound like. Right. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I would definitely check it out. It's interesting. And one thing that I do take issue with is in a lot of the discussions, media press that has been given to this organization. I grew up in this environment since I was born. I have a lot of friends that did as well. A lot of very successful, intelligent friends who are doing amazing things. Traveled all over the world, very successful, started businesses, television, everything you can think of. And our parents kind of were all involved in this, and us not really as much so, if at all. But in the media and a lot of the coverage of this, discussions that people have, they talk about our church and they talk about Jonestown. They talk about Waco. They talk about cults where people were murdered, where people were sexually abused as part of the doctrine. And I really take exception and offense to that in a way, because there was nothing like that going on from my experience. Nothing that was anything even remotely close to that. So there's a lot of sensationalized articles. Like if you Google a church, Universal and Triumphant, the first thing you're going to see is probably when I believe it's Aaron Prophet went on Oprah, and that's what they had.
Moira.
Jonestown, is this the next blah blah blah? And it's like, no, these people are just religious nerds, libertarians who think that the world's going to end, but they're not out to they're not ever going to shoot at a police officer. They have guns. They don't even know how to use them. They're not driving around armed waiting to shoot at the FBI.
Well,
and so that's one thing that I think exceptional.
But it's one thing to say that, but like you're saying, the thing that made Church Universal and Triumphant national news was the fact that they got busted purchasing illegal automatic weapons.
Right. And that was Ed Francis's head of security.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was something. So there again, and this is a big thing. After talking with my parents about some of this stuff that happened back then, and everything that I've been listening to, all the discussions, everyone's opinions, and it seems that there was kind of a cult that was created around this whole thing that wasn't necessarily what was sanctioned by the church. Like, the church didn't buy automatic weapons, thousands of them. The church didn't condone certain activities and behaviors that maybe they referenced that were taken to extreme by members and people close to the organization. And so, yeah, and here's the thing. Yeah, they're building bomb shelters and they're stockpiling weapons. And of course, people are going to be afraid and they're going to think that that could happen. Of course, it didn't. And it's not that it didn't by accident. It didn't because these people aren't going to shoot anybody. They have guns for self-defense, and they really earnestly believe that. And I think that, as crazy as that may seem to some people, I think it's, if you have a gun for self-defense, that's your right. Especially if you're in Montana, where it's a big part of our culture that a lot of people, if you live in San Francisco, you wouldn't necessarily understand. That if you own a gun up here, you don't own it as a means of harming another person. You have respect for it. Maybe you probably grew up with guns, and that they're not toys. They're for hunting. They're for protection, whatever. But people, I don't know. It's just a different mentality. And so I do get upset when some people try to lump those things together. I know that, and this was crazy to learn through some of these discussions we've been having, that there was a church member who was part of the shelter cycle at the ranch, who was, I guess there was a Black Ops helicopter or FBI, some sort of government surveillance helicopter flying over the church, right? Is this correct? Flying over the main church shelter, and he was going to shoot at it. And so that's the justification for saying that we were going to be the next Waco.
Not entirely. There was observation the night that the church did their big main shelter drill.
Right.
There was concern from FBI. There was a helicopter that was observing, but it was under observation. I don't think that there's ever been any acknowledgement of threat of anybody shooting, but I think probably the concern from the outside sources was that people in a panic state who had access to
guns
would
shoot at the feds,
would do something, would do something panicked, unintelligent.
Right.
And it's fair concern, because that's how human behavior goes.
It's possible. I guess.
Because what you're saying from an insider perspective, you're also saying from what you experienced and viewed as a child, you're not looking at this clandestine organization that is doing these strange operations underground.
Yeah, of course.
That's stockpiling illegal weapons.
Right. And that would be a big red flag for anybody, anywhere, at any time.
And it was, yeah. Absolutely.
But I think it's a big stretch to say that we had anything to do with people that committed mass suicide or raped girls. The leader of the organization took advantage of young women.
Right.
So comparing my upbringing to that is offensive to me personally.
I get
So
that.
I get that a lot of the people, like I said, we're talking about some of these people were strapped down to bomb shelters at the night of the drill. Strapped down. Yeah, and that's
I had that experience.
My shelter experience was not like that. And maybe I'd feel differently if it was.
And even within that experience, within that single night, there were so many variations to the experience because the shelters were done to varying degrees. Some people had functional bathrooms. Some people were peeing in buckets at the end of the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us were strapped down. Some of us weren't. Some of the lighting fixture wasn't even completely done. There were panels that were undone. And, and that's terrifying. They're telling you, like, you're going to be underground for 7 years, but these things aren't even fucking done yet. Like,
right. And I was 6,
right.
I think, or I forget exactly how old I was. Do you know the year?
I was, it was 90. It was the winter of 90. So I was
90. I was 6.
I was 9.
I was 6. So I remember less than you, but I don't think my parents really dropped the big bomb on me. Like, hey, we're fucked. We're going underground for 7 years. So it was just like, hey, we're going to go over here and hang out for a while. I was like, oh, okay. So I could see how that would really affect somebody's psyche. And I've talked with some other kids of members from the organization, and it's interesting to think about what could have happened if that was never a part of the philosophy, right? So these people, there was a whole community of alternative medicine and healing, and like I said, a lot of fringe membership where people were like, I'm kind of a member, I don't really go, but I hang out with all these new agey people. And there was all the positive and negative that went with that, like the multi-level marketing scams and the sham health products and stuff. But also there was a lot of Eastern medicine and herbal treatments and shit that actually worked. So it was kind of all that combined together. But it's just interesting because, I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on that I don't think was sanctioned by the church. Like Elizabeth Clare Prophet would say one thing and then people would take it to an extreme. And not that she didn't intend for that to happen, but in a lot of cases that just happened over and over. that happened in music, in food, in just the way that parents controlled our lives. And there was a lot of more balanced people in the church than others. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. As far as cults go, it was relatively benign. However, as cults go, there are some unifying themes that were absolutely present.
Absolutely. The focus on judgment is a big thing. Guilt and judgment.
Mm-hmm. I'd say guilt, judgment, the spiritual bypassing. Although what I do understand is that people were encouraged to work on their psychology as well. And yet there was definitely this attitude around negative emotions as being caused by discarnates, is like not having your energetic field shored up enough. So there was this sort of notion of spiritual failure attached to emotional disturbances as well.
Right, like you're weak, and that's why that's happening to you. You're spiritually not strong in your defenses.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Also, I saw it as a way for some people to be like, man, I just feel this heavy opposition today. And it's kind of a way to not take responsibility for your own well-being and physical and emotional state. So you're saying that, oh, I'm feeling this way or I'm not clear-headed today because this energy is being directed against me.
Right.
Yeah, not calling anxiety or OCD or not actually calling it a spade, like
right.
And then also people kind of with what you were saying, Justice, with the spiritual failure bit, I think people were encouraged to pray away their problems and But it depends on the person. Some people would be more action oriented, seek counseling, seek whatever resources they needed. And some people wouldn't. Some people would go sit in their bedroom and just do like an hour of Violet Flame and call it good, and then feel a little bit better, but their problems are going to resurface because whatever the core problem was with that particular person wasn't necessarily addressed just by praying, by praying on it.
Justice, I was really interested by what you were talking about last time and touched on with in another one that I saw recently about kind of the trance state, getting it through these like hypnotic chants, especially in a group of people. Could you talk about that? I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I think whether it was intentional or whether it was just sort of a side effect function for the group, I think that was something that the decrees that we were playing with earlier, I think that was something that they served a function in, because you get a bunch of people participating in a monotonous rote thing like that. And you're going to start changing your brain waves. Individually, you're doing it on your own, but particularly in a bigger group setting. And to a large degree, some of these group decree sessions, the entire purpose of them was to prepare the state for receiving dictation, which is essentially dictation was Elizabeth Clare Prophet channeling these messages from these ascended masters, which, I mean, depending on what you want to believe about the possibility of that, regardless, what it does is you get people all in this altered brainwave state, and they are naturally going to be more susceptible to any information that is introduced from that state. And not only is it going to go in at a conscious level, it's going to sink at an unconscious level as well. So there, I think you have people that are also not only in this more susceptible state, but they're enchanted, they're in trance, and then they're going to take whatever it is that's being delivered from that stage as being infallible. It's the word of the ascended masters. And then, as Sean was telling us in our podcast, at that point, when those words come off the stage in a state of dictation, they become church doctrine. They go into what was called a pearl of wisdom and was sent out through the entire community. And those words cannot be taken back. Now, to go back to what you were saying, Leif, is absolutely every individual is going to be subject to their own personal biases and interpretations of what those words mean. And that's going to match up or go into conflict with their own sort of internally held value systems or with their own internally held states of disassociation. And there you're going to get people acting out in ways that didn't necessarily come down from the stage, but are still so deeply attached to that state of trance that to them, they are acting out in a completely justifiable way because they are in alignment with what the Ascended Masters said.
Yeah, that is super interesting. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. It's really interesting to think about altering brainwave state in groups. Another example of that would be a concert or
absolutely
any sort of live art experience. I guess the main difference being that when it's that setting, it's not looked at as the word of God. And
I mean, rock musicians are pretty hot, right? But
right. Sorry, I kind of got distracted on my tangent earlier. But what I was trying to bring it back to was, imagine what could have been created with this kind of community idea if there wasn't this focus on the shelters and the end of the world, if all of the millions of dollars we found out weren't directed towards the construction of these things and were instead put towards this community. With the stuff you're talking about with kind of this group trance sort of setting is super interesting, because I've felt that. I've done decrees. I've spent times doing decrees throughout my life. Not in the last, a lot of years, But just like any form of what somebody who may not be religious may use prayer for. Having a hard time, things are difficult, all of a sudden you decide that you're going to start praying. But anyways, a lot of people kind of just put themselves in this mental space where they were believing anything that was given to them, and then also creating a group mentality around the interpretation of it and what they decided as a community that actually meant. In the same way that a pastor takes what the Bible says, or even somebody takes what a pastor says and says, that means this, which means this, which means this. And then all of a sudden you're doing something that is way immoral or completely unjustifiable. And you're saying that it reverts back to scripture. And that's the way that it's okay. And that's a big danger. But I saw a lot of that happening. It was really interesting to see what Sean had said too, about things getting basically coming off the stage and then being, now that's the way that it is forever.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these little pearls of wisdom and little just snippets, like I said, became things that I think were just blurbs that happened in the moment, whatever she was channeling, whatever's going on there, right? Mm-hmm. Making it up. She's who knows? I have no idea what to call it. And then these little blurbs get taken by our parents and then turned into something else, which becomes something that we have to live with.
Well, and that is the danger always of setting yourself up as an ultimate spiritual figure of authority.
Right.
Is whatever you say is going to come down, and it is going to supersede, in some cases, people's own internal guidance system and common sense.
Right.
And if it touches them in a place where it triggers them, where it activates some sort of distortion in their own psyche, then you really have problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's weird because for a lot of people that are still members today, Elizabeth Prophet never fell off the pedestal, because if she did fall off the pedestal, they either wouldn't believe in half of it, or they would see that she was fallible like a normal person, which means the dictations are fallible. And so
I
it's
disagree
kind of
right there with that, because I think the fallibility was always apart from my mom's, from what she's told me of her perspective, that she was just a human still, but had this special ability and connection.
But the words coming out of her mouth. So in that moment in time,
That's not infallible. Yeah.
She's not fallible, but as soon as she steps off that stage, she's fallible. But a lot of the members, like pointing to her daughter's book, Aaron Prophet's book, I've talked to a bunch of the members, including one of my own parents, and they just flat out don't believe a lot of the stuff in the book. They either think it's a lie or they think that it's a distortion, but Aaron has no motive to lie. She's just recounting the events as they happened. And so if you take Elizabeth Prophet's like personal sexuality or her, other things that could be seen as flawed under church doctrine. I'm trying to think of another example. Or her getting really angry. Like Sean said, she had a legendary temper. I mean, anger is like one of the emotions that you're really not supposed to have. And a lot of us are really taught to either pray it away or to suppress it to the point where, it could be unhealthy. So I kind of wonder if some of the people currently still in the church, if they accepted some of those things as being true, does it make her fall off the pedestal at all or not? For me, it was like the disconforming event of my parents telling me, the bomb shelters were just practice, like nothing was really going to happen. It's like, how did you not get the news that a lot of the rest of the membership had, that this was the second night was the real, the second night was it. But I was told
not a drill.
I was told my whole life that it was a drill. And then the older I got and the more stories I heard, I'm like, okay, something doesn't add up here. Something is wrong. Like their version of the events doesn't align with what I'm hearing from other people who are a little bit older than me, and then people who are in the inner circle of the church. So it was kind of weird.
And it's, from my perspective, it's a sad whatever you may think about the church and their philosophy, it's a sad turn of events that there was a focus that even happened. Like I said, imagine if that was never an aspect. They never had bomb shelters. They never stockpiled semi-automatic weapons. And instead, they focused all their millions of dollars of contributions and donations on building the things that they were trying to build, they said they were trying to build. So it seemed that I don't even I don't even understand the reason for it. It doesn't make sense why that would be a good idea. So maybe there was just like a serious delusion that came upon her, or this was early onset of Alzheimer's. That I have no idea. But to think that that was a good idea, and then there was going to be an end date for the world, and then after that, then what happens after that, and why? From a financial standpoint, from a membership standpoint, it doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah, I mean, they could have had the amount of land they had, and they were already doing organic farming. I mean, assuming the bomb shelter stuff didn't happen, that money they could have reached hundreds of thousands of people in membership. I mean, not necessarily that you can fit that many people on that amount of land, but I think their church could have grown much, much larger in the United States than it is today.
And so for a lot of us growing up, we kind of had a grab bag of whatever of these philosophies and beliefs that we wanted to pull from, without any sort of pressure as to you have to believe what we believe. A lot of my friends' parents, they believe what they believe, and they believe that Elizabeth Prophet was dictating the word of God. But aside from that, I think it's worth mentioning that was one aspect of this. The other aspect was borrowing of beliefs from different religions all over the world. Hindu beliefs, Buddhist beliefs, Kabbalah, some Islamic philosophy, just so the idea of kind of unifying cultures and religions through a philosophy was present in its good aspects as well in my personal upbringing. I saw people from all over the world, and a lot of them had different philosophies than me, and those were accepted. There was a lot of judgment of certain types of people that were different, but not that I noticed in a racial way, or I had friends that were in the closet, so to speak. I don't really recall anyone that I know that was out of the closet being. I think I had one friend that I know that was out pretty early, but a lot of people repressed that kind of thing and held it in, and I know that could be very damaging and painful. For the most part of the people that I knew, there was a lot of acceptance of other ideas and cultures and philosophies. So I think that it was all kind of rolled together into this loose community, some of which were devout members who went to services multiple times per week and looked down on anyone who didn't. And some of which were, like I said, they used to be members, or they left after the shelter cycle, or maybe the mom or the dad is into it and the other parent isn't as much. And some of my early mentors were people like that. They were like, "Oh yeah, but come check this out. Here, let me give you this album, but don't tell your mom."
Yeah, I would say for me, that's been one of the positive aspects, is definitely the conglomeration of philosophies that we were exposed to before we were even, out of high school, while we were still in grade school. And I meet people who are 20 years older than me who have been spiritual, metaphysical seekers their, most of their adult lives, who have just sort of gotten to that level of exposure that I completely take for granted and have to a large degree disregarded. Right. And it's like, okay. And I don't mean that disregarded and like I don't mean that to be disrespectful. I feel like, having that level of exposure, I also have this really fantastic spiritual bullshit detector. And it's like,
yes,
anything that's not serving of life, that it's passing itself off as spirituality, I immediately dismiss.
Right. And throughout history, there's been this sacrificial group in many religions where they kind of, it's like a masochistic almost thing.
Yeah.
Monks and penance and shame associated with just like the idea of bearing the weight for other people,
Yeah.
which was definitely present in the organization growing up. Like the idea that we're light bearers and we're responsible for saving the world for other people. We as kids are special. We have a special mission as kids. We're important.
Yeah. How did that impact you and your friends?
Man, I've never really shook the notion that I was special. That idea has led me to work really hard at things that I care a lot about. I guess. I don't think that I'm special or better than other people, to clarify. But the idea was, you're born into this opportunity, basically, of we're open-minded, and you came with a special thing that you're supposed to do, like a mission in life. Like you have something important that's your work that you're supposed to do here in life. And that can be like a weight. It can be like a heavy weight where you feel like, man, why can't I just be myself and just be happy with that? It can also be a great concept. Like any good parent would say, you could do anything. If you want, you could be Secretary of State or Vice President or President. If you work really hard, you can achieve those things. So for me, I worked really hard to get good at things. That's what I value in life, is being good at stuff. Like I have my talents and my passions. I've worked really hard to get good at that. And part of that may be because of that philosophy, where I feel like I'm supposed to live up to this great potential that's out here that is like larger than life, that mandates that I be successful and whatever it is, wealthy, famous, popular, on and on. So I think that can be, for me, it's been a positive thing. Also, through my 20s, I wasted a lot of time. I had a near-death experience. I almost died at work in Minneapolis from toxic chemical exposure from paint fumes. I was in a coma. It was pretty serious. I had memory problems when I woke up. And really before that, I was 27 at that time. Before that, I moved around a lot and I worked, and I wasn't really focused on the things that I always felt like were important to me in my life. So I kind of wasted a lot of time in my 20s. And then after this experience, I woke up a little different. I had some serious memory problems, short-term memory problems. I would forget almost on like a 1-minute reset what was happening, where I was, what I was doing. But coming out of all that and then moving back to Montana, not even to the area where all the church people were, but getting back into college. And now 9 years later, I feel quite realized in my abilities and my talents because I spent a lot of time pursuing those. So I feel like I could sit there and I could say, oh, it's because of my upbringing that I was such an idiot for most of my 20s because of this crazy situation I was born into, and I was rebellious and I didn't know myself because of his philosophy. And that's the reason why I was like that. And then maybe I had this experience that allowed me a second opportunity to find out who I am. I feel like I have a decision where I could say that it was because of the things that happened to me when I was a kid, or the way that I grew up, or I could just blame it. I could take the responsibility upon myself and say it was because I was a fucking idiot. And now I decided one day not to be, and to work really hard. I don't know. That's
I think that kind of defines growing up in general, where whatever, like whatever your background is, it's like, I was an idiot and I was unskilled and I didn't know what I was doing. And then like,
so then I got some skills.
I was like, okay, wait, maybe the world doesn't revolve around me and I should be less of a dick.
Right. Seriously.
Yeah, that's pretty much the process of growing up right there.
Leaf, with going back to some of these core concepts that we develop as kids, this idea that we have a purpose, that we have a mission. Do you find it hard to relax? Like, do you find it hard to do nothing?
Yeah. And not in a bad way. I got to be honest. I've worked hard. I've transformed my life numerous times. I could reach out and relate to Christoph. I had a period of time in my early 20s where I was heavily addicted to drugs. Pretty much took myself down a road where I was hanging out in the worst possible places and doing crazy things. And I brought myself back from that through my own hard work and just a decision that I made to change my life. And I've done that numerous times throughout my life. I've lived in many different cities, and I've started with nothing and lost things and then built them back up. So now where I'm at now in my life, I got a lot of things that I've done that I'm really proud of. I've worked hard on my talents and my friendships and relationships. I'm happy with that. And when I have time, the extra time to just chill, yeah, I can chill. I'm going to Puerto Rico in a couple of weeks. I'm going to chill hard while I'm there. But at a certain time, when I do have, like any artist, any good artist, I have this thing where you feel like you're like, I should be creating something right now.
Mm-hmm.
I should be practicing my Scriabin etude right here, or I should be using these keyboards to get better at Ableton and making more electronic stuff, or I should be finishing my rock album, or I should be doing live videos with my trio, or I should be working on my acoustic looping set. There's on and on and on. And for me, that is not something that comes from a place of stress or PTSD or anxiety. That comes from, like, it's what makes me feel alive. It's what I'm passionate about, and like you were talking about this trance state, right? I remember we were talking last time about like the flow state, right? Where and some people deny that you can receive whatever it is, inspiration, energy. It just comes from you, right? It's just you, whatever you want to call it. But if you're in a setting with a group of people, like for me, when I'm playing music, right? When I'm playing music live and I'm playing at a show in front of a bunch of people and I'm feeling it and everybody is in that moment with me together, it's not about me and my ego. It's not about me controlling the moment and worshiping myself. It's about us all. Like, it's like church. It's like a congregation. It's like we're all in this moment together experiencing something that we can't quantify and tell you why it is what it is. But it makes us feel something that a lot of us believe is a deeper connection than we have scientific tools to measure and ability to quantify with the five senses. Yeah. So when I'm in that moment feeling that, that feels to me like inspiration. That feels to me like it's coming from somewhere else through me. Like, I'm not playing the guitar. The guitar is playing me, and I'm there seeing what happens. So at the end of a song, everybody's freaking out, and we come to the end of it, and it's just like, I don't even really know what happened.
Yeah.
Like, we play a lot of improvisational music too. So it's like, what just happened? I blacked out. No, was it good? I think that in a lot of these cases with religious spiritual leaders like this, they may be in some sort of flow state where they may be experiencing a certain similar thing, except also it's subject to the whims of their subconscious and
absolutely
alternate personalities, repressed emotions. And instead, like I said, of them talking about in terms of art, it's the unequivocal word of God.
And I think it changes it completely when you go there, because I've been in those flow states myself, both with my writing, where it's like your fingers are flying across the keyboard I'm
Right.
just feeling the words before I even realize what I've typed. And I'm like, it's like this state of like watching the keys and feeling my fingers move and being like, damn, I just wrote that. Look at that sentence. Fuck, that's sexy. Like, yes, get it, girl. Like,
Nailed it.
yeah, love that feeling. Such a good feeling. And as a public speaker, I've definitely had that feeling. And it's like this beautiful, eloquent transmission just comes out of me. And people receive it and it resonates, and all of a sudden everyone's applauding, and there's this energy that's being conveyed and transmuted. But the difference between me doing that and somebody else doing that is
Right.
I'm not delivering the fucking word of God.
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, that was a good book. It was great. I really liked that. I really loved that book. You really did a lot for me, but not like that book ends all other books.
Right. Well, and I love it. There's a section in the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert where she talks about this poet, and I can't remember who it was, but this poet talks about how she would be working in the field and she would feel this wave of inspiration coming, and it was like a poem would like be like chasing her across the field, and it would come through her, and
Right.
she would have just a certain amount of time to get into the house to write it down. And it was like catching the tiger by the tail. And occasionally, like what would happen is like, she would get there, she would get the pen and the paper, like pencil to paper, and like even write it down backwards, because it was like the inspiration it was just about to move through her. She was just about to lose it. So
Right.
it's talking about it as it's some sort of, I don't think external is the right word for it. I think it's more of a transpersonal force where
Right.
it's something that can move through our sort of shared psychological spaces. And
That's so interesting to me.
not something that's scientifically able to be defined. And yet it is something that we have all experienced in one way or another.
Right. And I think some people would, like you said, disagree with the concept that even comes from anything but yourself. But imagine, right, being J.K. Rowling, just this whole idea for this book series flashes into your head one day on a train ride or whatever. And how does that happen? What are the reasons for that happening? Is it a glitch in the time? Is it some sort of foresight or connection to other people that you are able to manifest something like that is bigger than yourself? And that to me is one of the important things about my life. Like, and so I've always had a mystical side where I believe in a combination of science and spirituality, and I think that they're not separate. I think that they're one and the same, personally. And for me, that has always come through music. My parents, I was super lucky growing up in the church. I started piano lessons at 6. I was playing Chopin and Beethoven as a little child, and then I got my first electric guitar when I was 14. My dad always played guitar, and they didn't know that I was playing rock music in my headphones secretly in my room or whatever. But I was always lucky that I had music in a lot of way that other church kids were completely denied it. But for me, it was I was listening to, you listen to an album or you listen to John Lennon, and he's been dead before you were born, or this Chopin etude, and it makes you cry. And that doesn't make any sense. That to me is like a physical impossibility. So somebody did something that's so moving even after they're gone. So I don't know how, it's kind of like a hack in time. And that's what art is to me. It's like you can leave something that you can do something that's bigger than yourself. And yeah, I would say that maybe from my church upbringing, I have some sort of internal feeling like I have an obligation to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with going back to the decrees and that flow state, people in the church talk a lot about how good they feel, like during a dictation or after they do decrees. And I think
they're meditating too. They're kind of like meditating.
Yeah.
altering their brainwaves.
Right.
Yeah, they're putting themselves, whether it be self hypnosis or not, that's been thrown out there a little bit, but they're putting their brain into a very relaxed state, probably a state that feels pretty good to escape from real life for a little bit and to go into that meditative state. And I think it's very possible that with decrees and dictations, people wanting to do them over and over, listen or do them themselves, ritualistically, that they almost become hooked in, or they have like maybe even a neurochemical addiction to it in a way. Because whether you're doing art or music or you're chanting, your body feels good. I know that feeling. Like I've gone to a Hindu chanting session in Bozeman a couple of years ago, and my body hadn't felt the way it felt in that session in a long time. Like, even though I don't necessarily believe in all those things, my body was in a state of like, either my skin would kind of tingle, or I don't even really know how to describe the sensation. Some people describe it as a warm feeling.
Go. Let's go.
And I'm sure musicians feel that all the time. If I'm like working on a photography or video project and I'm in that flow state, I feel a similar way to how I felt, doing the decrees as a little kid, or singing is one that still does it for me today.
That's interesting. So singing is, and like music has always been a part of religious services, right? Since the dawn of time. Chanting, Gregorian chants, like the basis of Western music. It's just always been a thing because there is like this mystical quality to music that kind of brings it all home for you.
It changes your state.
Right. And so I guess from a musician's perspective, we don't try to separate that from what we're feeling. Like if you're going to a Buddhist group, church, they don't really call it. You're going to a Buddhist center, I guess. And you're going there and you're meditating with some people, and then you're chanting the Om, right? And maybe you're not sold on this whole idea in general. But you're there and you're doing it and you feel something. Maybe later you're reflecting on it, like you said, Baird, and you're saying, did I feel something? Maybe I felt tingly and I felt warm and I felt like I was connected with these other people because we're all resonating the same sound. And vibrational waves of sound are flowing through all of us in unison, depending on how close we are in pitch. And this is a real physical phenomenon that is actually happening to people when they use sound in unison. It's because sound waves are moving through matter and resonating with each other. Anyways, there's a lot to that I find fascinating and really interesting. And I remember the church talking about this sort of stuff, but I think it's, for me, there's a definite distinction between just the experience of singing your favorite song with your best friend that you haven't seen in forever in a car driving down a sunset highway versus some sort of chanting that feels disconnected or that you don't know is real. Like, I guess you could say the difference would be between like a real, like, amazing soul choir singing their asses off versus like some disingenuous people singing awkward 17th century church songs.
I think the context, I think, our brain, like, we give it a different context and all of a sudden it has different meaning. I think it has something to do with the tonality of it as well. Like, you get like, so say like you get like a bunch of people at like a rock concert and they're all kind of singing along, and the music's coming off the stage and everybody's very much in this shared state, but there is no religious overtone.
Kind of. I mean, there is.
There's
These
there's
guys
a
are
state.
gods.
They are gods, but it's different.
Right. It's definitely different. I'm not going to disagree with you.
Whereas you get, and I mean, from fans, like rock fans, football fans, you get that fanatical energy anywhere where you place that state of adoration on something external. it happens. But when you give it specific religious connotation, something changes in your brain.
Right.
And I don't know what it is. I don't know how to define it or explain it, but it becomes something that becomes, you've assigned it such a significant meaning that people will do batshit fucking crazy things to uphold it, to hold the standard of what it means to them. It becomes dangerous because it moves, when it becomes that kind of spiritual fanaticism, it moves out of the realm of shared humanity, and it becomes something that is non-tangible and yet is so important that, like I just said, people will do insane stuff. People will kill, people will maim, people will go in so far in the opposite direction of what it is supposed to stand for to uphold their ideology. And that is fucking dangerous. Yeah,
it is for sure. Luckily, nobody went that far killing and maiming in Church Universal and Triumphant that I know.
Yeah, they had the guns. They had the guns, but they never used them.
Right.
Yeah, they weren't gonna. I mean,
these people you've read in our group that there was abuse, right?
There was horrifying to hear some people's individual stories. Like I remember hearing one person's story, and I was like, man, like if we were all hanging out in an immigrant doing whatever we did, like we wish we would have known, we would have came and picked you up. I say that with the utmost sincerity and like good intentions.
Right.
Honestly, I think that it's easy to associate abuse from a parent or anyone with an ideology that was also associated with them.
Yeah.
To draw a direct line and say that this was the cause of the abuse may be true in cases, a lot of cases, or in some cases may not be true. And I am no one to speak to any experience but my own.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you can draw a direct line to any kind of abuse that comes from an individual, regardless of the system that they're in, because it excuses them of personal accountability, and that's not okay.
Thank you. I would agree with that. And that's what it comes down to. When I deal with my parents, for example, and I feel like I really got lucky listening back to a lot of people's stories. I really got lucky with my parents. They were eccentric and still are, and take a lot of patience in certain ways. I really appreciate them because the way that they allowed me to grow up was very free by comparison to a lot of stories that I've heard. But I always know in dealing with my parents, I always have it in the back of my mind that these are not normal people, right? There's and you have to just know that these people were heavily into this cult. They believed in 144,000 souls coming back, enlightened beings of a root race, right? Come back to Earth, reincarnated as us, maybe some of us kids, to usher in the next golden age.
But now there's
one thing. They believe that, right?
That's part of the Jehovah's Witness mythology as well. This number, 144,000.
This is interesting. This is biblical. This is a biblical reference, I believe. The origin of it, right? So somebody took the Bible, somebody else translated it like 17 times and lost a bunch of shit, redacted for the king, and then other people took that and reinterpreted it into whatever new context. So you have these people that they believe that, right? And they also believe that in Venus that there's a higher vibration than we can perceive, right? So Venus, there's a layer on top of Venus that's like a fourth dimension where these highly evolved spiritual beings live, and they send us energy and we can communicate with them, right? And then there's the great central sun, and then there's all this hierarchy of like the cosmos, and there's names for these people, right? And they have colors and twin flames, so a male and a female counterpart, and on, and there's one for each ray, and then there's angels that correspond to these rays, right? So these people believe all this stuff. So it's like this whole Lord of the Rings kind of setup. So you have to understand when you're like talking to these people, right? When I go see my mom or my dad and we start talking about whatever, that I know that there's going to come a point where she's going to talk about this stuff. And that's going to be kind of, that's where it can go.
Have you, I've recently
there's a wall there with any sort of whatever it is. And my mom can tell me, she's telling me many firsthand accounts of unexplainable stuff that she's witnessed with her eyes. And I've seen, and I've had hundreds of experiences personally with premonition, dreams that play out in the next day or months. I've had tons of unexplainable ESP like experiences. But I just know that when I'm dealing with people of this, that were in this church, they believe in aliens for sure.
Hiding within clouds.
Yeah.
Or
clouds shaped like
reptile
spaceships.
People living among us.
Get them out of here. Get them out of here.
And
Three fingers, two fingers.
Right? You can break them up. That's right. And send them on their way. I remember this is like a flashback, right? Like I remember being on like the bus as a kid and like seeing those clouds and getting like that high pitched sound that you'll get in your head sometime and be like, oh my God, it's aliens. Like they're like,
and then it was like a joke. It was like, hey, what's the latest? What's the latest, Bob? And Bob would be like, oh, well, there's happened us with this X-ray from this planet, and they're changing them nanotechnology, whatever. Just on and on about what it was, almost like a joke for us. Like, hey, what's the latest, Bob? And we'd all just be sitting there laughing or whatever. There was, like I said, growing up, there was Foot Zone, aromatherapy, John Fanuzzi and Golden Ratio. They employed over 100 people in the Valley. He had a whole wellness center there. There was a lot of successful people that built businesses and did alternative medicine and healing. And there was a lot of people that were studying yoga, Tai Chi, energy work, different therapies. And so I would always take any of this stuff that I heard with a grain of salt, so to speak, right? So you hear something and you're like, do I think that's crazy? Yes. Next, what about this? Do I think that's crazy? Let's do a little research, weigh it against my like kind of open-hearted belief versus, or not even belief, just open-hearted, like earnest seeking of truth in general. And then, so I would always take things like that with a, you know, just to not at face value as much as like,
what do you think would help?
Maybe.
Yeah. What do you think would help people kind of challenge those beliefs? Like if you sort of challenged them naturally.
Yeah, well, the problem with some of the beliefs, it's like, nah, that's insane. That sounds like a good conspiracy theory. I don't know, and I don't know how I would ever know. I don't care that much. But a lot of the beliefs that I'm talking about would be like for example, that there's crossovers between Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. That Judaism, like there's literal passages from the Quran that are almost identical to things in the Bible. They have almost all the same cast of characters at one point. You know, so certain things like this you think about, and then you weigh it against what you believe. And I don't think that anyone has the right to impose their religion on someone else, as much as I don't think anyone has the right to impose their lack of religion on someone else. And so I would always just be like, does that make sense to me? What do I feel? Maybe. Sure. Let me do some research. Oh, I discovered that that's fucking crazy and not true. Am I going to go argue with my mom about it or disown her? No, I'm not personally. Because it's not for my parents, their beliefs are dogmatic and rigid about certain things. but I've accepted that that's the way that it is. And so I choose to approach different subjects with them.
Mm.
Do you ever have to set up boundaries with them since you don't believe in the really far out stuff? Like if they bring up the Ascended Masters or bring up stuff that is directly correlated,
All the time. They always do that all the time.
and you haven't had to set up boundaries with them.
No, it's fine. Like for me, it's not something that I get violently upset about, I guess. I get upset. I get upset when I think about people from these organizations, leadership of these organizations, taking advantage of people who are giving them a lot of money that they don't even have money and they're tithing. That upsets me. People who are focused on these small communities of people that they think are the only ones that understand them. Some of that upsets me. But when it comes to talking about this new dictation that came through and Saint Germain, blah, 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 and this is the new dispensation, or that the dispensation ended and that's when the crazy Trump cult stuff started or whatever, I just kind of tune out, try to change the subject and see if I can segue into something where we have more of a connection.
You just said something. Please come back to this dispensation.
Oh yeah, let's come back to it.
Please come back to this. Yes. Elucidate.
Okay, so let's jump forward. So then what happened is, after the shelter cycle and the decline of the organization's membership in 90, what did you say?
In the 90s.
In the 90s. Midnight.
It just decreased pretty steadily over the 90s.
Because people were like, oh, the world didn't end. We spent all these money on bomb shelters. Okay,
well, and they sunk their life savings into it and had nothing to show.
Exactly, yeah. So that tends to put a damper on membership. So going forward, Elizabeth Prophet was diagnosed with, is it Alzheimer's, right? Early onset Alzheimer's, and she quickly degenerated.
And epilepsy.
And then died. There were two that I know of main offshoots of CUT.
Three. There were three.
Three, right?
Yeah,
okay, three. So there's the Temple of the Presence. There's the Heart Center, and the other is.
It was called The Real Jesus with Kim and Lorraine Michaels.
Oh Lord!
The Real Jesus.
I remember stumbling on that website as
the Real Jesus. He was blonde, wasn't he?
I remember stumbling on that website as a kid and reading some of the material before my dad started his group. And I'm just like, this is whack. Like, and I still believed in the Ascended Masters at that point, to a point. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous.
Well, so what I want to know is, so the three offshoot organizations from Church Universal and Triumphant, and they all claim to be picking up the mantle, the flame, the torch of the messengership. The baton has been passed from the sages, the hierarchy of the universe. So now I'm the new messenger and I have the word of God. What I was talking about, Justice, was in reference to specifically Baird's dad's organization. I'm sorry, I'm not going to.
Oh, okay.
That's mean to say that. Okay, so the Heart Center. So the Heart Center with David Lewis as the leader and supposed messenger 2.0. Interestingly enough, the church members kind of always had a history of leaning Republican.
Yes.
And right. And to be honest, I think the main reason for that was two tenets of Republican philosophy, which are being pro-life.
Yep.
That's the number one, ding, 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 ding.
Bingo.
And then number two being kind of a focus more on personal responsibility. And making your own way in the world.
Yeah, I mean, the Conservative Party before it went wackadoodle was...
Yeah. And so I remember being a kid, and I remember people would have discussions and heated disagreements at the dinner table or whatever about politics. So what I'm talking about, guys, is a time where Republicans and Democrats would have dinner with each other and go to each other's houses.
No way.
And debate ideas and be like, you know what? I disagree with you and that's okay. Cheers. And and also sometimes even be open to changing their minds about certain things.
That's not a thing.
And I remember this happening. So anyways, now, obviously we live in now, and things are a bit more polarized. So there was a recent shift in the Heart Center, which is close to me because four of my parents, 2 step parents, are members. Fairly active members. So there's a recent kind of shift. I don't know where they decided that this would be a good idea to be like, Trump is legit and we support Trump in a church. And it's really funny because a lot of these people don't fit into your mold that you would have of what a Republican right person is supposed to be. Like, these are like new agey people who believe in alternative medicine and do yoga, who are also far right. And I don't know where or when that became a good idea, that they decided that they were going to shift towards just straight up supporting one party. And I think I remember talking with you, Baird, and you said you really didn't have any idea why that happened either. But I'm very curious as to these organizations, if these people are straight up saying, you know what, here's a real opportunity. I can make shit up. And if I put it in this context that was kind of already framed out for me, then I'm setting myself up for success financially and with this church that I'm making. I already have a built-in membership. I know these people are going to give me money. Or whether these people think, honestly, that they're receiving these messages from God. And I can't tell you the answer to that question, because I really don't know which it is. Because it may be that they believe that they're downloading this stuff. So what do you guys think?
I mean, my dad has always been pretty conservative. Like, I didn't know who he was at the time, but when I was a teenager, I remember seeing Rush Limbaugh books on his bookshelf.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think there's been a thread in his life of like this kind of self-righteous path. Like, I'm morally and I'm spiritually superior to you because I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke marijuana, I'm not homosexual or bisexual or any number of these things. He
Totally.
has felt this way pretty much. I know he's felt this way at least since his 40s, but probably goes further in the past than that, because he's always expressed that people who do drugs are spiritually inferior, or people who are gay are fags. Trying to think of other examples. Yeah, there's any multitude of examples, but if you have this philosophy of like this golden age coming about, then there has to be some figure or group of people that are going to lead you to a golden age. On the flip side of that, then there's got to be a group of people who are marginalized. So the LGBTQ people have to either disappear or go into hiding. Drugs would either have to cease to exist, or there'd have to be centers all over the United States to help people through drug addiction, but that they're not going to pay for that. So they wouldn't advocate for that because it costs too much money.
You mean the church members?
No, I'm talking about the spiritual philosophy of a golden age coming, and what it would take for that to happen. In a golden age,
Just kind of let the drug addicts just die out.
Yeah, something would have to happen to them. Either they mystically like no longer have their core issues, their core traumas that cause them, that lead them to drug addiction. Their traumas are wiped away, or I don't know what. I'd have to research more like what causes a golden age. But in the past, there was a golden age in Rome and Atlantis, and homosexuality and rock music in Atlantis and cloning in Atlantis led to the downfall of Atlantis. And then homosexuality supposedly was one of the things that led to the fall of the golden age of Rome. So
I wonder, we've been hearing about this stuff all of our lives, right? Is this something that was written?
Oh yeah. It's in Pearls of Wisdom that came from dictations, talking about rock music in Atlantis and human cloning in Atlantis and black magicians in Atlantis that sunk in the ocean 30 or 40,000 years ago.
Right.
What's curious, what's preceded actual golden ages like the Renaissance has in our past has been things like the plague,
A plague, yes, a plague.
So maybe we're about to come into a golden age next.
Okay, well, let's get real. This is interesting. Some people would say, "Oh, maybe they just got the day wrong. Oh, it's good that we're prepared because now we are prepared, and now see we were right all along." With the modern context of coronavirus and global lockdowns and totalitarian actions being taken by people who may have a misconstrued view of their reaches of their power and how our government is set up. And anyways, that just comes from some of my own personal opinions. Yeah, these people were talking about ushering in a golden age. They weren't really thinking too much about the people that were going to get left along the way. There wasn't a lot of that, right? Because the whole idea with the bomb shelters is we're going to protect us. Fuck you guys. You're out there. You're going to die. You got radiation poisoning. Sorry, dude.
Well, and I'm curious, Baird, where does this fall in with the heart centers, like the golden age? Is that something that Heart Center is taking up the same position of?
Well, I know my dad believes that, in the future, there's going to be light bearers that will bring about a golden age, that it's their mission to bring about a golden age. Well, for that to also happen, the evil ones either have to be exposed and disposed of, or they have to be spiritually destroyed.
Killed.
So they believe that Trump is one of these people who is draining the swamp, quote unquote, and exposing people, but they ignore so many facts that his administration is one of the most corrupt in a long time and has some of the most criminal activity of any administration in recent history.
Right.
So they're just ignoring a lot of facts to get to that conclusion that he is somebody who's capable of exposing and there is political corruption. I'm not denying that. There's all kinds of political and money corruption at the highest levels of government, but
sure,
they're coming to a weird conclusion that he's going to be one that's capable of doing that when he's part of that system and he's very much entangled in.
And why was that decided upon as a good idea for the organization to move towards politicization in general? I don't
know. I mean,
at least 30% of the membership, people that were, maybe interested. Yeah, I went a couple times, and then they go like full Trump. Like, really?
It doesn't really make sense because it doesn't really draw from the history of Cut, because Cut did it in kind of roundabout ways of saying, like, you really need to be pro-life because otherwise you're preventing souls from coming to the planet. So Cut did it more from a philosophical perspective, but the Heart Center has done it more from a righteous mission, like declaring that the Ascended Masters are supporting Trump.
They're backing him up. So the dispensation thing is that now, according to some people, they don't believe the Trump doctrine coming from the church. So they're saying that now that's over. There was a period of time where it was the real thing, and now it's not. Now
they can just take it back.
Yeah, no, I think it's in cycles. It's in cycles in numbers of 3. You know how this works, Baird.
Oh, if you could see the head shaking happening right now, folks.
Oh my God. It's the
3,
same.
6,
it's the
9, 9 times
mentality.
9,
it's the same mentality
33.
that allows people to support someone like Trump and support those ideologies that are really harmful.
Okay,
and then later say, "Oh, well, there wasn't really voter suppression," or we want to count all the votes, but not really acknowledging that they were supporting something that was a total sham for years.
I think that it can get really tricky when you start choosing political candidates and saying that they represent your beliefs. I think that is a huge mistake that a lot of people make, and a lot of people are making right now. I personally believe that Trump would have just got annihilated in the election if it wasn't for the recent impositions based from coronavirus. Like, for example, here in Montana, we've been Democrat. Our governor has been Democrat for, I forget how many years. It's been many years since it was flipped, which is funny because it seems like a predominantly Republican state.
Very much so.
But a Montana Democrat is not the same as a lot of Democrats other places.
Valid.
You'll support, if you're in Montana, you're a Democrat, you still support gun rights and on and on. I guess maybe more moderate would be a good way of describing it. But I think that a lot of people are scared of, I don't know how this happened, that the virus became a politically polarizing thing. It didn't in a lot of other countries, but somehow within 2 weeks of this happening, if you're a Republican, you believe this. If you're a Democrat, you believe this. Just insane. And then people are drawing these hard lines, and governors, in like a strange flex of states' rights, governors are now kind of running the show on policy making in different local precincts. So on one hand, you have far right people who are basically, a lot of them, denying any sort of inequality in our justice system, which is insane. And then on the other hand, you have people on the far left who are extreme in other ways, who are doing other fascist moves, like telling you that you can't go buy a car seat or non-essential items or travel to your second home. Things that are outside of their power, that are explicitly guaranteed by you through the state constitutions and the federal constitutions. So you have fascist ideas being portrayed on both sides. And then you have people on the right name calling people on the left. And then you have people on the left saying that everyone that voted Republican is just a bunch of Trump supporting racist bigots. And you can't believe that these people are that ignorant. And so this, from my perspective, and I grew up, my dad was a lawyer, and he's definitely like far right libertarian. And then I became a hippie when I was kind of like a hippie kid when I was 16. And I went to rainbow gatherings. And so I've decided in my life to make up my own fucking opinion on every issue. And I don't feel that I'm represented equally, like, well, by either one of the candidates. There's a lot of shit that has gone along with the Trump administration that is just insane. I mean, how many people were indicted? You know, in the immediate cabinet?
Oh, good.
12
well, immediate
plus
cabinet. I know there's been, I think, like 10 or more.
Right.
And several people who've been convicted.
Right.
And hopefully Trump will face New York State charges once he's out of office. Because I heard on NPR the other day, he cannot pardon himself for state charges. He can only pardon himself. If he can pardon himself, he can only pardon himself with federal charges. So he could be in trouble in New York State.
I think it's a mistake to look at United States history over the past 30 years and not to just see rampant corruption in every presidency since, well, except maybe save Obama, since Reagan. You had Iran Contras, you had Clinton and all kinds of stuff that was involved with that. You have what happened to Bernie Sanders 2 times. And then you also have the fact that Joe Biden is a moderate. He's good friends with John McCain. If you want to see something really incredible, go watch John McCain's concession speech to Barack Obama. It's so respectful and honest, and it's kind of a window into a time in politics that seems like it's gone forever, and I hope isn't. But I understand my parents' beliefs. I don't agree with them, but politically, I get where they're coming from in a lot of ways. And I don't think a lot of people wanted to vote for Trump. I think that a lot of people didn't want to vote for what they perceived to be a move towards kind of extreme government control of our daily lives. And I think, me personally, I believe that has a modern coronavirus context. Because just look at what's happening in the country. You have businesses boarded up. You have governments telling the people that, sorry, you can't go to work. And that's okay for a lot of people if you get unemployment. What if you're a small business owner? What if you, not just food service businesses and restaurants, but what if you're a small business that relies on interpersonal community, the whole entertainment industry? I have tons of friends that just like, sorry, what you do is illegal now. And I understand the responsibility of taking care of other people and making sure that we get past this. But I think it's also a mistake I think it's just a mistake in general for anyone to say, if you don't believe like this, then that's just preposterous.
Mm.
And that's what's happening. If you don't believe like this, then what? Oh my God, I can't believe there's people that think like that.
Yeah, I think it happens from both sides. I think, and maybe you can speak to this in your own family system. It's like, what do you do, say, within a small community, or what do you do particularly within a family unit when you hit these, particularly if they're these religiously supported, dissenting, like deeply dissenting personal values? How do you navigate that?
Like, for example, like say homophobia. Would that be an
Absolutely.
example?
That would be an excellent example.
Oh, man, I have no idea. I have a few friends that I can think of right now offhand, probably more, that were openly gay by the time they were, 16, not really trying to hide it. And their parents are still loving and caring of them. I don't know how that works in that relationship. I would imagine it takes a great deal, like me, of patience on their part when dealing with them and trying to navigate, like I said, into new areas of conversation. Let's change the subject. I love you, Mom, but this is kind of where this topic ends for you and me, or whatever. That kind of thing. My dad goes off about politics all the time. And from him and from my upbringing, I learned to debate and disagree with people, but respectfully, and even listen to what they're saying. And I had a philosophy teacher in MSU, and he was just traveled, just well-versed. He'd spent his life studying philosophy and getting educated about it. And he was in a freshman class with all these kids, and they're up there and they say, you know what? I think about it. What do you think? Well, I think this. And there's a different perspective that he never thought of before. And he was like, wow, yeah, that's awesome. Like, he was so humble still with all of his skill and attainment, as you call it. He was still so humble that he could receive new information and change his perspective. And I'm really sad. It feels like that's completely gone with the polarization of the political landscape now. When I approach subjects with people that have that mentality, it's just, that's where it ends. You can't get through to them. You're not going to change their beliefs, but you should at least be able to disagree respectfully.
This came up, and this was my comment on a recent one too. I think there is a difference between having a difference of opinion with someone, a really truly conflicting core value, right? Like, sometimes there is something that you value so deeply to your core that if that isn't respected, that isn't acknowledged, it feels dehumanizing. And it makes it legitimately almost impossible to have a connection with someone. But I think that
I see what you're saying. Yeah. And that makes sense to me. Like what Christoph was saying.
Right.
Right.
And I think the other terrain that really fucks with relationships, the ability to say agree or disagree is where there's abuse. It's like, I cannot agree to be a party to abuse, either past, present, or, acknowledged or unacknowledged. Right. And I think these are healthy lines that need to be drawn within our relationships, even with our own family systems.
Of course, especially with your own family system.
Right.
What would be an example of that?
Of abuse?
Well, of like drawing a line with it, like, were you talking about theoretically somebody justifying past abuse? It sounds like.
Justifying past abuse, or not being willing to acknowledge the existence of it.
Right.
Not
this
being
has been
able
a point of contention between a couple members of my family, very strongly, who are in total opposite ends of the spectrum. And it's become so heated that it's made rifts between them.
Yeah.
Serious rifts. I feel like for me, I am willing to argue my position with my parents or people in the community. And I'm always going to love my parents. Like I said, not everybody's parents are the same. Some people, man, some of the things that I was reading about, the things their parents made them do as kids,
Right.
insane. And I would probably feel completely different about my parents. But I have a lot of patience for them, and I just understand that my mom thinks that this, and I don't agree with that. That's okay, because I still love my mom for all of her good other qualities. And that's not a deal breaker for me, because it's not such a strong hatred coming from her. That's not how she is. Being closed-minded or stuck in a belief system is not the same, usually not the same as being hatefully in opposition and being hateful about something.
Right. That's a good distinction.
For me,
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction.
in my situation. Because if one of my friend's parents still, after all this time in a modern context, still is homophobic and has bad things to say about trans LGBTQ people, that's probably because they're coming from a place of some sort of hatred, right? Because they really feel the need to bring it up and make it violently apparent to everybody that they're wrong, throw it in people's face. That doesn't seem right, but that's not the way it is in the case of most of the people that I know. I see. I've seen their interactions with people who are openly homosexual, and they're not being hateful to them, but they are maybe looking down on them, which of course is not right, but it's not something you're going to talk out of them.
I think it's going to take our generation, this generation that didn't grow up with a lot of ingrained, not that we didn't grow up with ingrained homophobia. However, we were able to grow out of it.
Sure.
Because of being out in the world, being away from religious doctrine. Same thing with fundamentalist Christians. I think a lot of other people in fundamentalist religions, not just Christianity, where there's homophobia.
Exactly.
If people are away from that environment and people that believe that strongly for a long period of time, they lose those beliefs because it doesn't align with their values.
Right.
Like I used to be kind of homophobic in my teens and 20s, but I recognize that people are people and we're all equal. And with a little bit of empathy, I think those kinds of prejudices go away. But it can take a while. It doesn't happen overnight. People have to internalize that empathy, that the person next to them, a man loving another man or a woman loving another woman, that's a person loving a person. It's not when they make that
none
person,
of your fucking business.
Yeah, that too. It's a person loving a person. Like when you bring the person into the equation, it's love. I mean, it really can't be anything else.
Right. And personally, I think that sexuality is a sliding scale. There's probably very few people that are 100% on either side. And some people are asexual, right in the middle, I guess, or whatever. I don't think that it's a hard line on either side. To draw lines and say that people are better than other people for any reason is a big mistake. Whether it's race, creed, orientation, anything except who they are as a person. Judging them and putting them in a category based on those things, to me, is wrong. And that's a belief that I've grown up, and I do kind of believe that a lot of our parents have grown up with us. You guys know, when 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we were kids, we were throwing these words around. Like you said, the F word. But to be honest, I never, or any of my friends ever said it derogatorily about a homosexual person.
Right. It was always in that kind of offhanded.
You're making
manner.
fun of a guy or whatever. You're just like calling the guy a pussy or whatever.
Right.
Or however you're using it feels wrong and foul now.
Yeah.
Talking about it. but the intent behind it was not what some people's experience, like what you say, Baird, like somebody just throwing it out there, like seeing somebody and calling them that, or like the same as like a racial slur. That wasn't something we did.
Yeah, I think
But
the F word is
there was
just as
also
bad as I think it's just as bad as the N word, but I think some of our parents don't recognize that. They don't internalize that the two are equally as bad. Because you're despising somebody for something that's just who they are, or you're despising something for a quality about themselves that can't change.
Yeah, and that's not okay in any way, shape, or form ever. But we weren't like that. Me and my buddies growing up, we may have been insensitive and politically incorrect, but those were the times in a way. And I think a lot of our parents have grown with us as well, but not all.
Sure. I think it varies person to person and their life experiences and dynamic with their kids. I think some of us have been able to reshape our parents' like individual dynamics. We've been able to reshape maybe even sometimes their core concepts, but I think it really depends on the family and the dynamic of the parent and the child.
Yeah, there's a lot of people I think still kind of have a loose belief affiliation. They have the books, right? Still at their house. You go see the books. Maybe they have an altar, maybe they don't. But they believe in yoga and meditation, and they chant ohms and maybe do tai chi and are into alternative medicine. In general, that has been a positive thing for a lot of people. And I know for a lot of other people, it has been something that they feel their parents have been caught up in almost like this just, like you said, belief system that they can't get out of. Like they're just stuck in this loop. But I know very few active members.
Oh yeah. I mean, and depending on what age group you're talking about, almost nobody between the age of like 30 and 40, 30, 45 that was raised in it, almost none of those people are active now or believe in barely any of it.
And the interesting thing is a lot of those people are atheists. It's funny because it almost backfired, right? They were sheltering us from rock music with a beat that came from the devil. They were sheltering us from sugar and candy and television and trying to put us on this monastic kind of track to being the bearers of the next generation of golden age or whatever. And what ended up happening is everything that happened. Now I would say a majority of the people that I've talked to seems like they don't even have a spiritual belief in anything. So they kind of ruined it for them, which is really sad because I don't feel that way, but it is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Atheism, agnosticism, or just, and other people, maybe it's justice, like conceptualizing spirituality to be a more healthy integration with life and less about rituals and dogma and more connection with other people and with that's life affirming. You said this in a previous episode, that it has to be a life affirming thing.
Right. Not just like putting money away in your bank account for when you die.
Right.
I want to try to steer us to a wrap up because we covered a lot. I think we could probably do another episode because we didn't get to a lot of it. What are just some final touching points that you have, Leif?
I'm grateful, I guess, for my upbringing. I think it was weird, unique. I think there was a lot of crazy and also a lot of honest seeking of truth and trying to do something good for us. We were involved in a lot of activities. My buddy Aaron Howard's parents started Youth Reach. We went to Mexico a few times and did service projects. We were in the Scouts. We were in Civil Air Patrol. We hiked all over. We did a lot of really fun things. It was a fun place to grow up, and that may be just a function of it being Montana and us being young, wild teenagers. Our parents were always off kind of in this other world doing whatever they did spiritually, their own crazy stuff. And a lot of us ignored that. A lot of us participated in it at one point in our lives and then kind of became disillusioned or just realized that wow, there's a lot of holes in this for me. This isn't really doing it for me. But I do feel that a lot of us have retained some of the concepts, like the idea of, instead of dividing religions and saying, oh, I'm superior to you because I'm a Christian and you're all a bunch of non-believers, having a little broader view of that than that. Like, for example, saying, oh, maybe you do know the Christ, but just under a different name. So I don't have to look down on you. And I can accept your culture and even learn from your viewpoint on religion or spirituality. And I think that was a healthy thing for me. I have a lot of friends that I grew up with that are just incredible, intelligent people, in spite, I guess, or because of, and in spite of the odd way that we grew up, the interesting circumstances surrounding it. I know a lot of people that were set back for a lot of years by being sheltered and cut off from certain things. My heart goes out to those people, and I know that we've all kind of been through this journey to get to where we all are now, and it's really great that we're talking about it, kind of being open. I can honestly say that I have a lot of friends who they met their wife because their wife was a kid of somebody in the church, and they have kids now. You could attribute a lot of their experiences to these connections. So it's kind of weird to look at it in that context, being like, oh, this terrible cult also is where my children came from. Right. So I think you have to look at it as just, this is something that happened. Everybody had a different take on it, and different level of extremism that they associated with it. You can let it cripple you. You can try to overcome it. You can go to therapy and try to deal with it, work through it, talk about it with any of us. I know that of the people that I know, any of us would be more than happy to listen or help anybody who has had any sort of similar cult experiences and has trauma or issues with it. Any of us would be more than happy to talk with you and like earnestly help you through it, because there's a lot of good people that I know that came from this. It's fucking crazy what happened. But we're all still here, most of us. One last thing I wanted to share is kind of my view on spirituality through a story. One time, maybe about 6-7 years ago, I was giving one of my sister's friends a ride across town here in Missoula. He was kind of a hippie kid. I think one of the festival kind of kids. Went around to a lot of these electronic festivals and everything that goes with all that. Anyways, there was this epic sunset that night. It was just amazing. And I was giving him a ride to wherever he was going. And I looked out. I was like, wow, that's freaking amazing. And he was like, it's just a fucking sunset. I was like, are you serious? This guy can't appreciate the beauty of this amazing thing that we're witnessing right now? To him, that's nothing. And that's kind of the way that I view religion and atheism. I think that for me personally, life and the beauty of nature and how fucking amazing it is that we're alive in the world and all the things in the world are, how amazing and incredible that is, that's enough for me. That is where my spirituality comes from. I don't need anything more than that. And if there are things that I can't explain that I've witnessed in my life, or some sort of mysterious connection between people, or vibrations, or things that I've felt or witnessed that don't make sense in the context of our five senses and linear time as we know it, then that's okay to me. And I'm just going to let that be a mystery. And that's where I derive my mysticism and my belief from. And I don't need anything more than that. So you can choose to look at it as none of this is magic, or you can choose to look at it as this is all magic. And it's really just a perspective, in my opinion, at that point. The sunset is fucking beautiful.
I think, as with any experience growing up in Church Universal and Triumphant, or within your own family system, it's our choice not to let the experiences themselves define us, but to really move into the places inside of ourselves, positive or negative, however we felt we were impacted by those experiences, and claim ourselves, to take whatever it is that we experience, to take the pain and alchemize it, to take the good and put it back out into the world in a meaningful way. And, it's, if you're hurt, deal with it. If you find it beneficial, then offer what you find to be of benefit back to the world, regardless of whatever the structure is that creates those places inside of yourself. You get to determine what that means for you.
You said that way better than I was trying to.
Yeah, I would tack on to what you're saying and agree that the ideologies, the past doesn't have to own you. It's a part of us, but every day that we live, we have opportunities to heal, to grow beyond it, to forge connections with people that wouldn't have been possible in the past, wouldn't have been possible under an old paradigm. And we have opportunities sometimes for bridges or sometimes to make boundaries with people, depending on where those people are and where they're willing to meet us. For people who haven't had an opportunity to do therapy and they're dealing with a lot of self-concept issues, or they're dealing with relationship issues, or they're struggling with maybe stuff with substances, therapy can help. Even if it seems like it's going to be a painful experience, or even if it seems like it's going to be something that you don't want to unwrap parts of yourself, that process has the potential to reinvigorate the person that you are and the person that you're capable, the full potential, the full actualization of the person that you can be.
And there you said it right there.
I think that's a concept we were raised with. I mean, but I see it in a different way. I see it in more the full human being, the full concept of who you are as a person, your creativity, your compassion, all your emotional capability, your emotional intelligence.
Everything that you could do, like
everything you're capable of doing
potential.
in this life. Therapy can unlock a lot of it. And I wish I had an opportunity to start doing it like 10 or 15 years ago, but it was too tumultuous of a time to start doing it 10 or 15 years ago, but I wish I had.
It's never too late, man.
Yeah.
Right?
It really isn't too late. It doesn't matter if you start when you're 30 or 40, it can still benefit everybody. It can benefit everybody. It doesn't matter
how. There's lots of different types of therapy too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you find a therapist that doesn't jive with you, there are 10 more out there that you can go check out.
And not all types of therapy are textbook counseling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My therapy has always been friends, family, and music, being able to play it out.
Art.
Yeah, there's even a branch of therapy called art therapy, where the therapist actually just has you do drawings or paintings to express what's
really fucking angry, sad face.
What's that strange dark cloud in the corner? Father.
That's my mom.
Yeah. Speaking of art and music, Leif, can you mention where people can find your work and connect with you?
Oh man, well, if you want to check me out, Facebook, Leif Christian, Leif Christian. I got a bunch of stuff that's coming out pretty soon. Hopefully playing live again when coronavirus ends. My trio is Ticket Sauce. My solo, got a bunch of different pages and a lot of stuff in the works. I'm gonna have like my first full-length album out sometime next year. Singles coming very soon. I'm very excited. I've been working on some of these tracks for a long time, and I got into a flow now where I'm recording and got all my gear set up, and my good buddy Aaron is helping me with mixing them and getting them finalized and out there. So I'm gonna have a bunch of music coming up here pretty soon, and hopefully playing live sometime in 2021.
Well, let us know if you are playing live. I'll drive to Missoula and come see you if it's a date that works out, or if you guys are in Bozeman. I know,
or Big Sky, or Livingston, or wherever.
Exactly. Yeah, anywhere in the neighborhood. Yeah, and Justice, where can people find you?
You can find me at illuminationwithjustice.com. You can find me on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, at Illumination with Justice. Friend me on Facebook. I'm pretty active on there. I am lame on Twitter, y'all. I just can't do it.
Yeah. Thank you guys for this conversation. Thanks to our listeners. Like every subscribe, every like, every time you download these episodes on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app, it helps spread it to more people.
Thank you guys for doing this, man.
And if you have a story, if you're a former member of Church Universal and Triumphant or a other fundamentalist, New Age fundamentalist cult, is that what we're calling them now?
Yeah, New Age fundamentalism. Yeah.
Yeah, give us a shout out. We'd love to open a dialogue with you, and we hope this is of benefit to everybody who hears it.
You can reach out to me, or you can reach out to Justice, whoever you feel comfortable starting that conversation with, and then we'll get to know you a little bit before we have you on the show, if we haven't met you already.
Thank you guys for doing this, man, sincerely, and thank you for keeping it open. I really appreciate that you're letting people put their stories out there.
For sure. We're grateful to have you, Leif, and thanks for being willing. And you've been listening to Blinded by the Light. And
if you enjoyed this podcast, the best thing you can do to support us is telling your friends and family. Building a community around these topics matters, because having our voices heard can mean greater healing and insights into our collective experiences. Subscribe to Blinded by the Light in your favorite podcast app, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to get the latest episodes. If you'd like to be on the show or want to send us stories for consideration, email the show at blindedpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.